Good evening, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Hope Papo. I would like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. I'd also like to thank my colleague Lukman Shadrack for taking you through that first part of the show. Now, over the weekend, the ANC wrapped up its 2019 manifesto review as they look ahead to next year's polls. But we also saw this week that the ANC hosted the United Ulama Council of South Africa, along with the Friends of Palestine, for the ANC's way forward in terms of its continuous support for the liberation of Palestine. We will be delving into those topics in a bit, but I would like to welcome the ANC Deputy National Spokesperson, Hope Papo. Mr. Papo, good day and thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
It's a pleasure to be with this important, informative station.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, Mr. Papo. Mr. Papo, before we talk about obviously Monday's meeting, 2019 manifesto review, ANC seems happy about it, don't they?
We still have to launch the manifesto next year,
Yeah.
and we're confident we're going to win the elections. Everybody follows us.
You're not foreseeing any challenges, or
Obviously,
yeah.
We're one of the few parties in the world which acknowledges our challenges in public. Very few political parties do that because we think we have got the strength and the capacity to can overcome our challenges. Otherwise, some of the parties would have long collapsed with the kind of difficulties a 111-year-old organization has. We're confident we're overcoming those problems, and some of the problems were caused by objective factors like the lockdown we had for 2.5 years. We also had very, very criminal riots in 2021. All those things, most of the businesses have been compensated. So we think that by the time we launch the manifesto at the beginning of the year and mount a campaign, whatever gaps which have polls have, we will actually cover them. We will actually win the elections. We have to win the elections because there's no political party which can manage the complex problems of South Africa, of racism, of sexism, of some of them cannot even manage municipalities. How are they going to manage a complicated country like South Africa? Worse, we've got international friends like Palestine, Cuba, and other places. Many of these parties in South Africa don't actually believe in Palestinian solidarity. And the ANC have been having this relationship with the Palestinians for decades.
Mr. Papo, I'm going to touch on ANC and, of course, challenges within the party and, of course, challenges they're going to face, ahead of next year's polls. But I want to talk about what happened on Monday. How important was that conversation with the Ulama of South Africa and, of course, the Friends of Palestine in that strengthening of ties with the ANC in terms of its continuous support for the liberation of Palestine?
The meeting was very important because the solidarity with the Palestinians has been the hallmark of the African National Congress for many years. Over 50 years or so, we've been having relations with the people of Palestine. And organizations in South Africa which also support the struggle of the Palestinian people for sovereignty and independence is very important for the ANC. Because ANC believes in dialogue, in engagement and the negotiations, and we've taken a view in almost all our national conferences to continue support for the Palestinian people. So the meeting on Monday was very important so that we strengthen the solidarity movement in South Africa. We strengthen the solidarity movement in SADC countries. We strengthen the solidarity movement in the continent that's represented by the campaign which is represented by Palestine for Africa.
Mr. Papo, the decision, of course, we saw the parliamentary motion being passed.
Yes.
Obviously,
I actually debated it.
You debated it, yes. I know you were there, of course, with various of your members from your party. Of course, the EFF was one of those parties that Julius Malema brought through, obviously, that motion. President Cyril Ramaphosa says, look, there's a lot of negotiations that need to go, there's a lot of talks that need to go, consultations that need to go. But is there confidence from an ANC perspective that South Africa will be cutting ties with Israel from a diplomatic perspective?
I think people must understand we are a constitutional democracy. We've got the legislative arm, the executive arm, and the judiciary. The legislative arm cannot instruct the executive in South Africa. It's not allowed. The executive cannot instruct the legislative arm. We cannot instruct the judicial arm. So when we take a decision in the legislative arm as represented by Parliament, Cabinet must table that issue on its agenda. Look at the whole range of issues. Consultations even include consulting SADC, within SADC, for example, so that we mobilize a maximum actions. At least some of the SADC countries which have not yet moved to that may move to downgrading, because when you move, we were on downgrading from 2018. Very few countries had even downgraded on the continent. So that consultation will also include AU, within AU itself, so that we have maximum impact. We look at a whole range of, the executive will have to look at that. But we are confident that finally that decision will actually be taken. But obviously, if it's not taken, we don't think it will not be taken. There must be an explanation why. So, but at the moment, people think that you can just make a resolution in Parliament and give an instruction to the executive. That will be unconstitutional to do, because we have got 3 separate arms of the state. We make a resolution, we give a motivation. They will probably look at all the things which National Assembly, remember, the decision was taken by the National Assembly, not Parliament, because Parliament is the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. And they will actually make. So we hope that it will be tabled very, very soon, early next year, on the agenda of Cabinet. Because without a Cabinet decision, because embassies, high commissions are executive functions, they are not legislative functions. And then we hope that decision will be taken.
DIRCO, of course, released a statement earlier this week saying that anyone that is going to be joining the Israeli occupation forces, they'll be dealt with in a criminal perspective. It's a strong message, isn't it? Because obviously, you know, the X within our constitution has a specific clause which saying that you cannot, as a South African citizen, fight other wars for other countries. And that in itself just is a strong message that is being sent to anyone that wants to participate in this ongoing conflict.
We actually have a law in South Africa. It's not even it's a law.
Yes.
Which says that you can be, it's considered mercenary activities. When you go and join non-state forces or state forces in other countries, it's considered a mercenary activity. We remember some of these people who engaged in activities which led to coups on our continent in the 90s. So that law is to prevent that kind of thing, of destabilization of our continent and other parts of the world when you are a South African. If you want to maybe to do that, you'll either be charged. You can actually renounce your South African citizenship and become a citizen of that country, and then become a full-time mercenary in that country. So we think it's important that that law be implemented to the full.
Before we go to the break, Mr. Papo, just to wrap up, of course, on Monday's discussion, the war crime charges. I specifically asked that question to President Ramaphosa, and of course, he has full faith within the International Criminal Court that the charges will be laid against Benjamin Netanyahu. And just from an ANC perspective, how urgent is that timeline for those crime charges to be laid against him? Because the death toll now continues to rise and more attacks continue to happen for the residents of Gaza.
Our ambassador in The Hague has already submitted South African formal complaint about the devastation and cleansing of people in Gaza. So we have already done that. Obviously, the ICC will decide on how to
and there are other lawyers that are also joining the court.
Absolutely.
So it strengthens the case, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But South Africa has actually made this position clear, joined by other countries, one in South America, and a few other countries. We hope other countries will join that formal complaint against Israel. Because what is happening there, I mean, collective punishment of people didn't even happen in South Africa. If they're looking for an MK guerrilla, they didn't come and kill people in the whole street. They captured the guerrilla of Umkhonto and other people, unless you are caught up in a shootout. But they wouldn't consciously come and kill the people in the whole street because they claim that there's somebody from Hamas or any other liberation organization, and then you kill everybody in the street. We think the the scale is too much. The proportion is too much. You can't say because there's one Jewish person who's killed, Israeli citizen, which is not correct. And then you kill 500 people. I mean, that is complete madness, which the international community and the people of the world must stop. And that's the position of the African National Congress.
After the break, I'll continue my conversation with Hope Papo. Do stay tuned to Hilaal Live. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'm in conversation with Hope Papo, the ANC Deputy National Spokesperson. Mr. Papo, when you look at, of course, polling, and of course, again, neither you or I can look into a crystal ball and foresee what's going to happen to the future. The citizens of South Africa look at the ANC and say, okay, do we still have trust within the party? As the spokesperson or the deputy spokesperson, do you feel that South Africans have a right to maybe feel a little bit of mistrust towards the ruling party?
Firstly, there was never an election where ANC before an election was at over 50%. Every time it's under 50%. And then we explain everything which has been done. We also explain what we have not done. We only don't talk about that. So we think that the trust should be on the basis that African National Congress is not a party which hides its challenges, internal and external. And therefore, we have gained experience of governing this country, both inside and our work outside the country speaks for itself. The respect our country has in the continent and in the world shows that irrespective of some of the challenges which are there, we have done a lot of work from where we were. I'll give you an example. Before 1994, there was a permanent load shedding in South Africa because black South Africans, in their majority, didn't have electricity. Now there's electricity, the economy has grown. We should have actually built stations, and that's why we're having load shedding. So when somebody says electricity was there before 1994, I don't think that person was in South Africa.
No, but I understand that obviously then Eskom had catered for a very few, a minority amount of people.
But the economy has grown. That also showed after 94.
I agree with you on that, but don't you think that when you look at, of course, when load shedding started, because of course, you said it now, more power stations needed to be built. But don't you think a collective...
They were built late.
Yes.
They were built late.
Yes.
And the ANC accepted that.
Right.
That the timing of the building of those stations was late. But much more work is done to actually increase capacity, because until demand is actually less than input, you must have load shedding. Otherwise, if you don't have load shedding, you'll collapse the grid. But as more and more power is actually put onto the grid. I was just giving you an example of a situation where black South Africans, and when I talk about black South Africans, I'm also including people from the Indian community.
Yes, Indian colored, so on, yes.
That's what I'm talking about. So I'm saying that we are a humble organization. We admit our weaknesses, and we then indicate how we're going to solve some of the weaknesses. Some of the things which the ANC are accused of, for example, currency manipulation, which has a very, very negative impact on the economy, is not caused by the ANC-led government. It's caused by people in the private sector, in the financial sector. The Competitions Commission, which was
they're trying to collapse the economy?
Which was formed by the ANC-led government. The Competition Commission picked it up. Connivance during the 2010 World Cup was picked up by the Competitions Commission. Price fixing, which was happened during the lockdown, during the COVID-19 lockdown, was picked up by the Competitions Commission, formed by the African National Congress-led government. So all these things are being solved. They are appealing the cases around currency. And therefore, you can't act when somebody appeals. But if they lose the appeal, the ANC says there must be tough action taken against those financial institutions which manipulated the currency at a time when it was very difficult. Our economy was experiencing difficulties. There are obviously people who have never been happy with an ANC-led government in South Africa. We know who are in the private sector. There are others who have always appreciated the change in South Africa. So we're not surprised because a democratic dispensation in South Africa guarantees, for example, worker rights, which was not a feature of South Africa. Workers were exploited. You could be dismissed somebody wakes up and dismiss you. But in a democracy led by the African National Congress, that cannot happen. There has to be due process, there must be fairness. Those are benefits which came with a democratic dispensation led by the African National Congress. Freedom of speech in South Africa was never there in 1994. So there are first generation rights which came with democracy. There are second generation rights which came with democracy. There are third generation rights which came with democracy. So when we look at the problems of South Africa, we must actually have all that in mind. First generation, second generation, third generation. And say, where were things before 1994 in relation to first, second, and third generation? There has been progress in all of them. First generation, second generation. But because we are wired like that, we don't just go around praising ourselves. In accepting that progress has been done, we also talk about the weaknesses. And I say very few South Africans know what's happening in other political parties.
So I know that, Mr. Papo. But obviously I brought you here to discuss the ANC. Now, I've allowed you the pleasure to speak about what the ANC has done. And of course, being a member, you have every right to, of course, mention the good work that the ANC has done. But of course, State Capture Commission, right? There are members within your party that have been implicated in that report. Now, I know it's recommendations. Don't you feel that state capture has dented the image of the ANC, and hence maybe these supporters, the ones that have been loyal to the African National Congress for many years, would say, look here, there hasn't been prosecutions. Now, I'm not saying that the ANC has to be the one responsible for the prosecution of those members. That lies within, of course, the Hawks and the NPA. But do you feel that the ANC needed to take a stronger stance on those who have been accused and have been mentioned in the Zondo Commission into State Capture Inquiry, that there needed to be harsher punishments for them? Not maybe harsher punishments, but that's a stronger word, but there needed to be some action from the NEC and executive of the African National Congress.
That will be wrong. Recommendations of the Zondo Commission are being investigated by the Hawks. And the Hawks recommends to the NPA. You can't take harsh action on the basis of recommendations which the Commission said should be investigated. You can't do that. Because if you do that and you find that the investigation says there's nothing, what are you going to do when you have harmed the image of a person? We're a constitutional democracy in South Africa. We're not a banana republic where you wake up, because your feelings about somebody, you can take action. And you only discover that there were mistakes. Because the recommendations of the Commission, by the way, there's a full report by government on implementation of the Zondo Commission report. Full report, which has been published in November, last month, on what, because some laws must be amended in Parliament. Already some of them have been passed by the National Assembly in the recommendation of the ANC. The fact that there was a commission is because ANC is transparent. ANC could have simply said this, we don't need a commission. Why do we have to have a commission? And then fought in courts everywhere, delay that process. The 2017 conference said there should be a commission. Whereas the president took a decision that, unlike other commissions which make recommendations, there cannot be action in some of the commissions. When somebody has testified, they cannot be charged. But the powers of that commission were amended by the president to ensure that whatever comes out of there can be used by the law enforcement agencies. They're not commissioned. There are no commissions like that, usually. So it means there was an extension of the powers so that the Hawks can now investigate. The head of the Hawks has given a report on what they're doing now through the Fusion Center on corruption which happens in some of the SOEs in the private sector and so on. A full report was given by the head of the Hawks, General Lebeya. So I'm saying to you, the work is happening, but because we're a constitutional democracy, you cannot just act haphazardly. Let me give you an example. There was a case of Mr. Koko, Machela Koko.
Yes, I've seen that case.
Now it was struck off. It's not changed so that NPA can gather more facts. So because we're a constitutional state, you can't decide to take harsh actions against individuals. Some of them are actually taking their report on review. What happens if the review is positive and you have taken a harsh action against somebody? And then that somebody, must they sue the ANC for having done that? So I'm just explaining to people that work is happening, But because we are a constitutional state, it has to follow due process. It has to be fair so that you don't prejudice anybody. But that doesn't mean that work is not happening. I can actually leave you with a copy of the report on implementation of the entire, the commitments which the president made by the state. The ANC itself will act. If somebody is charged and found guilty, disciplinary action will follow. At the moment, we are the only organization which has a step-aside police.
Yes.
And that is to balance. That is to balance. Because there have been instances where allegations were made against somebody. They resigned only to find there was nothing. It was political competition. The image of a person is damaged. They cannot even go back to their position. We don't want to go back there. And I can give you an example of a couple of people. Mr. Ndebele, who was our ambassador in Australia, accused of something and that he probably privileged a certain company when he was the minister. False allegations. And then he stepped aside.
Mr. Papo, I have to stop you there. I have to get one question in because we are actually out of time. Your former president, Jacob Zuma, of course, now he made his announcement this weekend. I think you know what he said with regards to the ANC. Is there a sense of concern from the African National Congress that the votes, especially within KwaZulu-Natal, he may carry a lot of weight with regards to that?
At the national level, we note his statement. Our provincial structure of the ANC, together with its alliance partners, have made this position clear. They are confident that they will win overwhelmingly in the province, and we are confident that what they said is actually correct. But for us, we just note work is continuing to ensure that the African National Congress again wins with an overwhelming majority. By the way, people have always said will not win, right from the first election in 1999, and we have always won.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens in 2024. I just have to get one answer, a quick answer from you. Mavuso Msimang, he's back in the ANC, of course. He said that the ANC is better off without Zuma. Is that a correct statement?
Well, I think he must explain why he said I can't speak on his behalf.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Papo, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
That's Hope Papo, ANC National Deputy Spokesperson, joining us here on Hilaal Live. Just to talk about, of course, the meeting that they had with various ulama on Monday, and of course, their review of the 2019 manifesto, looking ahead to next year's elections. After the break, I'll have your latest in news. Do stay tuned to Hilaal Live. You guys enjoy? Yep.